Aloha and welcome back to Wanderous. I am your host, Andrew Crusoe, and today I'm happy to announce that this is the 42nd episode of Wanderous. And being a Douglas Adams fan, I just want to celebrate the number 42. If you don't know anything about that, Douglas Adams wrote this great book called Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and it's the first really good sci-fi comedy novel, in my opinion. And they make this really big computer, and they wait 6.5 million years to find out the answer to life, the universe, and everything. Because all these ancient philosophers, they want to know, what's the answer to life? What's the meaning of life? And they walk up to Deep Thought, which is this massive computer. And he warms up, he wakes up, and he goes, well, the answer to everything, to life. And they're like, yeah. The universe, yeah. And everything, yes. And the computer says 42. And Douglas Adams apparently picked that number because it was the funniest number he could think of. So, welcome back to Wanderous. Today we're going to talk about sheep and Germany. God, that's probably the longest cold open I've ever done before I play the funky music. Maybe I'll change the music this time since it's 42. 42, it is Friday night and the moon is bright. We're going to have some fun and be number one, TGIF. This is not a good episode to start with if this is the first time you're listening to this show. Probably not. Maybe it's the best episode to start with. It's definitely going to be unusual. It's not going to be a normal one because there are sheep, and it's 42. And also, there's backstory to this, so you might want to go back and listen to the first episode, which is something backstory on how I went nomadic. I think it's the only episode that's actually numbered besides this one. And it's the only one numbered in the actual title of the episode. I believe that people shouldn't feel too attached to the numbers. I think people get attached to numbers overly. I certainly have in times of my life. And I thought if I don't put numbers, people can just kind of jump around a bit based on what they feel interested in, depending on what place they're interested in. So far, in case you're just tuning in recently, we've covered England, Scotland, Highlands of Scotland, France, a lot of France. But different parts of France, Britannia, I should say. It's the way they pronounce it. And after over a month in France, I should say it was nearly 7 weeks. I took a blah car to Brussels. I was in Brussels for a week. That was the previous episode of this one. And I found myself, after Brussels, in Essen, Germany. Now, when I tell people this, especially Germans, they go, why the hell were you in Essen? What the heck is in Essen? Why? And the short answer is, I wanted to save money. And there will probably be some money-saving tips in this. There surely will be. Basically, the bus stopped at Essen, and I thought I would stay in Essen 1 or 2 nights, couchsurf in Essen, and then I would take the train to Bielefeld to visit a friend of mine. So Germany, it was a little less touristic than my time in France. It was very different. It took on a very different tone. So today we're going to talk about sheep and the Ruhr River and just some this is probably going to be a short episode. I'm just covering a bit of the backstory. I'm mostly, the real reason that you should understand this episode, the real reason that I have this episode up here is a reminder. I keep mentioning sheep. You may be wondering why do I keep mentioning sheep? And it's because it's the first photo in the bonuses that supporters get for this show. Yes, people support the show monetarily, and they are my angels. I should just call them my angels. My original angels. And they give 5, 10, 20, sometimes $20 million a month. No, they're actually, the main tiers are $5, $10, and $20. You can cancel anytime. And people at $5 get, like, now it is about 25 hours of audiobook content. It's a lot cheaper than Audible. And the people at the $10 level get, you get so much stuff. I've had this Patreon. I've been working on this Patreon. I shouldn't record these at night because I get a little too weird. I've been working on this Patreon since over 7 years. So there's a lot of content. There's a huge backlog, and I've arranged the stuff into collections, and it's a lot of fun. It's definitely worth looking at. If you enjoy this show, it's worth checking out, because every Wednesday, whether I feel like it or not, whether you need it or not, I post behind the scenes photos of this nomadic wild adventure across the world, in which I will get to Turkey, I will get to Nepal, I will get to India, I will get to Japan, and this is all leading up to that. In fact, this episode is leading up to one of the most ridiculous and hilarious and absurd things that I did, which is that I dressed up like an alien in a dance party in Bielefeld. But that's not today's episode. That is next time, most likely next time. But I don't like telling stories out of order, and I don't want to do a short episode today about the sheep. Here's the thing. I really recommend Couchsurfing, and one of the reasons I recommend it is when you use Couchsurfing.com, which is very cheap. It's $15 per year if you're an American. It's probably 2 golden lira per year if you are from the land of golden lira. It's not expensive. Many countries are able to get it for free because Couchsurfing goes, well, the people don't have a lot of dough. People don't have a lot of dough in this country. They let them have it for free. And you can send out requests. You stay at people's houses. You crash on their couch. Most of the time, though, you get a private room. Guess what? This was the thing before Airbnb existed, and it's totally free. You're not allowed to give your host money. It's rude. You are encouraged to make them food, or it's all about cultural exchange and hospitality exchange. I've talked about this in many episodes, but in case you are listening to this show for the first time, I wanted to just touch on that. And this event of arriving in, I will call it an event, a lowercase e event, of arriving in Essen and riding the train, which was quite clean and quite expensive for going like 200 meters. It was like €3. Nonetheless, got me to where I was going, and I met my host, who was texting, and met my host in a sort of a little square, a market square, cute little cobblestones, and she was a teacher who lived alone in a wonderful flat, and I was given, where was I? I was on a air mattress, a comfortable air mattress actually, not always the case, but I had a nice air mattress in my own, it was basically in her office, but it was very spacious, hardwood floors, and I stayed there, I think 2 or 3 nights, and she said, hey, my friends and I are having a gathering by the river. Would you like to come? There are sheep. And I said, of course, this is my first time in Germany. I must go and I must meet the sheep. I must understand the sheep, and I must understand. And basically, we walked down to the Ruhr, which is, I'm not very good at saying that, but we walked down to the Ruhr River, which is like a 7-minute walk from her place. Excellent. And we find this semi-domestic, I don't know, this area where sheep are allowed to roam free, very close to the river. Now, I have a TikTok and YouTube short about this that I will link to in the show notes. The show notes are always at wherever you got this episode. So maybe there, if you're listening on YouTube, which you can, you should subscribe, please. It really helps with the algorithm, blah, blah. It's going to be in the description for the video. If you're on Spotify, which please, once again, if you subscribe, it really helps. It's free. The show is free. It's a labor of love. It'll be in those notes there. I think if you're listening to this, you're probably smart enough to figure out where they are. And I will be linking to some bonus videos that are totally free. They're not just for supporters because they're already public. I posted them a couple years ago, to be honest. But what I didn't post is this incredibly cute, oh my God, this incredibly cute photo of a sheep, a black sheep with a white triangle on its head. That's only going to be kind of just nestling up near the thigh/butt of my Couchsurfing host. Did not show her face because I respect her privacy. So there's nothing identifiable here, but it's such a cute sheep. Okay. What was very extra cool though was that this gathering quickly became a musical gathering. She had circus friends is the only way I can describe it. It was just so lovely. And people sang in German, of course. I was in Germany. But the thing I love about the Germans, there's a couple things I really appreciate about. There's a couple things I really do appreciate about the Germans. And one of them is that they are, I feel like they're almost always like trilingual. Like their language skills are quite good. The education there is quite good. And we sang music. We sang Beatles, if I'm recalling correctly. People had their phones. There was a guitar. It was just so sweet. We hung out like 2.5 hours. The half moon rose. There's a great photo of the half moon rising over the trees. And it was such a lovely community introduction to being in Germany. It was so spontaneous, and it was something you couldn't plan. And that's something that I've noticed about travel is, honestly, the majority of the time, I'm not going to put a percentage on this, but the majority of the time, the elements that are unplanned, they tend to feel the most special for some reason. They just tend to feel, they've kind of, I think it's because there's an element of like receiving, there's an element of allowing, where if you're open to something like that to happen, if you're open to an invitation and you just hold space for something to come through, then often what comes through is better than what you might plan. Now, of course, it's good to have some scaffolding, right? It's good to have, I know I'm going to be here and here and here. You want some idea of where you're going to be sleeping, at least most people do, in a given day. But within a day, being very spontaneous can yield such magic in my experience. Not soon after, I believe it was the following night, my host decided to make a vegetarian Moroccan dish, which is essentially, I don't remember the name of this because it was a Moroccan word, an Arabic word, I should say, but it was fantastic. It was essentially like sliced vertical carrots and zucchini, sort of making like a cone, in a circle. They're all like pointing upward toward the middle, with tomatoes and are these like raisins and cashews, which cashews, if you know me, you know that I am just crazy for cashews. And we shared this lovely, lovely meal. We each had these like cast iron. She had some great cookware, and we ate and we talked, and she shared with me a story which I won't get into because in case she listens to this, but a very interesting story about someone she fell in love with in Morocco, and this dramatic, hey, it's life. She really had a love affair with Morocco itself, I think, metaphorically. She just loved the country and loved spending time there and intended to go back. But it was really special and cool just to hear, her, just to really feel her, the passion that sort of changed her life because of her time in Morocco. And I was like, well, maybe I should go to Morocco. But I didn't go to Morocco. Instead, I moved onward to Bielefeld, which on a train, which I believe I had to use PayPal again with that. The thing about the thing that I sort of forgot to mention was when I got to Essen, the machine would not accept my card, and this will happen. This will happen sometimes. That's one reason why it's good to have at least 2 cards, preferably 3, because sometimes a specific bank there's all these points of failure. Sometimes, as what happened to you recently, your bank just might decide that a given country has scams coming from it, and they might block an entire country, and you might have to call them and go, "Oh, hey, I actually had a travel notification for this country. Why did you block the only travel notification? A travel notification is when you tell your bank you're going to be in a country and please make it work. And sometimes banks and credit unions and the like, they're busy and they don't pay attention to those things. So thank God when I got to Essen, and this is something that's very cool, the computer, the touchscreen computer, which did not have a very good English translation, which was surprising, actually accepted PayPal, which was wild. I'd never seen a physical, PayPal. People use PayPal on the web, right, all the time. I'd never been to a physical place that accepted PayPal. It would be like if they had accepted Ethereum coin or Bitcoin, I would have just fallen out of my chair. But they accepted PayPal, which was the only reason that I could, because I had just gotten to Germany. I didn't have, wait a minute. No, I think that the machine didn't even accept, I don't know if you accepted even paper euros. That's a good question. Now I tried to find, part of my problem was it was a smaller station. And I tried to find a person, and I was like tired, and I couldn't find a person. So the PayPal thing was the path of least resistance, and I just thought it was very funny. I paid for. So I went onward to Bielefeld. It was a beautiful day, green, blue skies, just amazing. And I noticed something about Bielefeld. I'll tell you the first thing I noticed was it's very pretty and very clean. The running joke about Bielefeld is, in Germany anyway, if you want to know an in-joke in Germany, listen up. Did you know that Bielefeld doesn't actually exist? This is a running joke. This is dry German humor. And it came about because apparently, and people can correct me in the comments, but apparently people would often not put Bielefeld on a map. There was like this running error that Bielefeld wasn't on some early maps. So they would joke, it doesn't exist because it's not on a map, My second impression after how pretty and clean and green, there's a lot of trees in Bielefeld, university town. The second thing I noticed about Bielefeld is that they freaking hate Nazis, which I was happy about that. Although the signs are a bit intense, because Nazis, there's a lot of, it's just racism incarnate with Nazis. I'm not gonna cover the history of Nazism, but it's pretty nasty. It's pretty terrible. So there would be stickers around town, and I'm going to try to find it for follow-up episodes, because I believe I also have a sticker that just was a follow-up to this first one, but basically this one is Nazis töten, which means kill Nazis, just in public. There's also a anarchist sticker. Bielefeld people are not shy about their hatred for Nazis, which at this point, it's kind of the one group that it's okay to hate. The other thing that I thought was pretty interesting about Germany, which was very confusing me initially, was I came across a store called TJ Maxx walking around. And apparently, this is the international name for TJ Maxx. Like, being an American, I know TJ Maxx. Like, it's a department store. They sell clothes. And apparently, they had to change the name outside of America because there's confusion with a British store called TJ Hughes. So go figure. It's just very funny to see these slight differences compared to other places. So long story short, I met up with my friend who is a very talented artist, and she graciously offered to host me and she has a couple roommates, and she hosted me. I can't say how grateful I am that she hosted me. And she actually had a tiny house in a sort of like a little garden thing. And I started to realize that there are a lot of there's different like definitions, there's different categories. There's almost like more categories of things. One of the things I learned was like a Ouija or a Vigi. And it's like I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but it's sort of like a shared house for students in Germany. Please forgive me that I'm pronouncing all this wrong. So she met a lot of her friends when she was like, had this shared house. And then now she has more of a nicer sort of apartment with a nice kitchen. And I was just, and she had this really cool loft bed, and it was so kind of her to host me. I'd known her through other travels, and I took a couple days just sort of settle in. I made her some of my famous cashew cheese, macaroni and cheese with broccoli and carrots. I took a picture of that just because it turned out really nice. Maybe I'll share that recipe here at some point. It's a dairy-free cheese sauce, and everybody loves it. It's such a hit. She worked at this like art store, like a sort of like a recycled materials, very creative, crafty store. People who support the show will also get a couple photos of some of the amazing things. I think she made most of these, to be honest. And just a lot of stuff. Some of it's like, crochet things and repurposed things. And some of it's just trash that's been turned into art, like this bumblebee made out of cans and bits. And it feels so much like a museum in a way. Like a trash museum, but in a good way. Or even she made like an owl I think she made this one. She made an owl out of stamps, like German stamps, but like molded it into a very believable owl. So it was pretty entertaining for me going through these photos. Just like, oh yeah, I forgot to do that. I just started to soak in this very relaxed, to me anyway, just very clean, very safe, felt so safe to me. And I learned about the Sparrenburg Castle, which we'll be talking about, if not the episode next, the one after. I will say this, I was very happy that the Germans had much stronger English than the average French person, to be honest. If you do decide to, as an English speaker, if you don't speak French or German or Spanish or you're probably going to have a better time in Germany than a lot of the other countries. Germans are very bilingual, trilingual. True for the Dutch as well. Very true for Netherlands, and the Danes as well to some extent. So, although I didn't go to Denmark, which is really too bad. By the time I was getting to Germany, and I was starting to think, things are going pretty well, and I was starting to flirt with the idea of going to Asia from here. This is me foreshadowing. But that idea had not fully taken form at this point. And I was busy being swept up into what was this city, Bielefeld, all about? What was this all about? My friend showed me these small houses and actually invited me to a little gathering with a couple of her friends. And these houses, you're not allowed to live there. You can get a whole house for like €1,000, but you can't live there. The deal is that you have to maintain a kind of community garden, but you can stay there a certain number of nights per year. And it's just a community project. And it's one of these like brilliant, lovely things that I wish that they had in America. I think it takes a certain amount of restructuring for the government of a country to realize that something like that is really brilliant. And I hope that America gets to a point where that becomes more. So anyway, this has been a weird episode. My advice would be, don't be afraid of the train. Come with paper euros, and you can get those from an ATM. I think the thing was, at this point in my journey, I hadn't actually used an ATM very much. I don't think I had barely used an ATM. I think I was doing a lot of this just everywhere was accepting cards, except the train station, the Bahn, Deutsche Bahn. Anyway, this is all in service to say that in the course of those first few days, I clicked quite well with her housemates, and I was invited to a art exhibit, poetry, expression, discotheque thing at a jazz club, although there would be no jazz that night. Little did I know that I would end up putting on spandex before the end of the night and having quite an emotional roller coaster. I might even do a members only episode. It depends. It depends how that next episode flows when I record that. But it was pretty wild. It was a pretty interesting time, and one of the most entertaining videos that I shot definitely in the first year of travel, probably the most ridiculous and entertaining video. And I'll talk about that wild story next time. Thank you so much for listening. This was a bit of a weird one. I don't have too much in terms of travel tips. I didn't go to anything extremely famous besides Sparrenburg, which I'm going to talk about in greater detail. That castle I'll talk about more in subsequent episodes. But I would just say this is part of the adventure, part of the journey. So I didn't want to leave this out. I didn't want to leave out the sheep for my supporters because the sheep are just so dang cute. But this is just the introduction to Germany episode. I might edit this down to like 3 minutes. Who knows? Thanks so much for listening. Please don't forget to subscribe wherever you are. You can always unsubscribe if you just get super pissed off at me. But the retention rate for this is very high. People enjoy this show. And if you're still listening, I think you probably do too. Thanks so much for listening. This is a labor of love. I'm just a guy in a room in Indonesia covering my nomadic journey and mostly giving you backstory for the crazy stuff that happens when I reach Asia. That's coming up. That's really coming up. But I didn't want to leave Germany out. How do I end this show again? Oh, this is episode 42. So it's just going to be a weird episode. I forgot about that. Douglas Adams once said that there is a theory that if anyone ever figures out what exactly the universe is and what it's for, it will instantly be replaced by something even more bizarre and inexplicable. There is another theory that states that this has already happened.